reiterate. Can we please keep ourselves muted until we're called, or unless you're speaking here today. Please, honestly, to take the opportunity to post the questions in the chat. And what we'll do, we'll take the questions once all three speakers have spoken, and we can address all the questions as we go forward. And this session is being recorded, right? And only the speakers will be shown in the recording once the session is over, and we will be sharing the recording afterwards. Just to go on, I mean, obviously we're here today to talk about tackling poverty in London, and as we all know, the impact of COVID has actually spotlighted some of the issues that we face and we have seen, and some of the issues where we're now seeing in the recent few weeks and months in relation to fuel poverty, and it's been spotlighted and highlighted with the recent increases in fuel and the utility services that we have. The impact of the furlough schemes and people having to change their working patterns, and also the impact of the welfare reforms that are taking hold, and also the £20 reduction in universal credit, and all of these things just factoring in and taking into account that people have been living in poverty. Housing, earnings, opportunity, and everything else has had an impact. And as I said, we have three great speakers who'll be showcasing what they're doing in each of their respective boroughs. I'll move on to the speakers. I think that's what we're here for. And the first speaker we have is Councillor Alice Macdonald. She's the Cabinet Member for Equalities, Neighbourhoods and Leisure in Southwark Council. And I think Alice is going to speak about Southwark's decision to include socio-economic disadvantage as a factor in their decision-making by committing to implement the socio-economic duty as outlined by the Section 1 of the Equality Act in 2010. Alice, can I hand over to you? And
great, thanks very much. I've done my introduction, so that's brilliant. Thank you very much for the invitation. As Councillor Butt said, I will focus my remarks on the socio-economic duty and how we're applying that in Southwark, but also on some of the other policies that we have had in place for a long time, but also some new ones we've put in place due to COVID. So I think we're all aware poverty is one of the biggest challenges we face. It is multidimensional and impacts people in many different ways. And I think it is really important that poverty does have a face, and for lots of us, it's people in our boroughs. And it's very easy to talk about it as an abstract, not even a notion, this word poverty that we're all aware of, but what does it actually mean for the people who we represent in our boroughs? And I also feel very strongly that poverty is about dignity. It is about making sure that the people who are most affected are involved in identifying the solutions, and I'll come on to that in my remarks. I think basically, and I'll come on to why we've kind of really formally recognised the socio-economic duty, is we can't tackle poverty unless we know who is being affected by it, what are the causes of it, and what are the solutions that really work to tackle it. And councils have a really key role, and I'm looking forward to hearing from my colleagues from other London boroughs, because I'm really keen to learn from this event as well, because I don't think any single one of us has the answer to how do you end poverty once and for all. So just before I kind of move on to some of the things we're doing, just to paint a picture of Southwark, and hopefully, I'm sure many of you have been here, but it is a borough of contrast. So stretches down from the Shard on the Thames through to Peckham, right down to Dulwich. And we have very high pockets of wealth in Southwark, but we also have pockets of inequality and poverty. The latest data from Trust for London shows that Southwark, the poverty rates are close to London average, with 40% of children judged to be living in households in poverty. There is a greater than average amount of income deprivation. The average neighbourhood here is 50% more income deprived than an average London neighbourhood. We also have high pay inequality, which is a challenge. And as Councillor Butt mentioned, food poverty and fuel poverty are huge issues here, and we see the numbers increasing. Before COVID, 1 in 4 of our residents were food insecure, and low income was cited as the reason for referral in 45% of cases, which really shows that this is a chronic issue. It's not just a kind of, I need food once in a while. It is a permanent situation for so many people. I was hearing this morning on the radio, people were talking about perfect storm, and I never really understand that phrase, because I think what we're facing is a devastating storm for so many people, with the universal credit cut, food and fuel poverty rising, increasingly harder to get access to food. So this is a really, really pressing issue. We know in Southwark that more than 4 in 10 people, more than 40,000 people are claiming universal credit and will be affected. And I think really importantly, 4 in 10 people who are on universal credit are people in work. So this is also about in-work poverty and how do we tackle that. And also important to mention kind of intersectionality here. During COVID, one food bank, actually the Latin American community, and we have quite a large Latin American community in Southwark, has not really been using food banks before. And one food bank during COVID said that 31% of their users were coming from the Latin American community. And I'm setting out some of those stats, and I know it's hard to kind of remember them, because it really points to the fact about knowing what poverty looks like in all of our boroughs so that we can tackle it. So it is a really challenging situation, which is why we need clear plans, strategies, and understanding of what we face. And that is one of the reasons why we kind of formally put into our constitution this year the socio-economic duty. And as Councillor Butt mentioned, that is Section 1 of the Equality Act, which introduces that duty on public bodies, but it has never officially been enacted. So unlike the other protected characteristics, where there is a formal duty on us as public bodies to look at that in our decision making, socio-economic impact in some ways is optional. And I know that many councils are voluntarily implementing it, but we felt it was really important to really signal the political imperative of that in our borough by amending our constitution. And for anyone who's in councils, it's not an easy job to amend the constitution. We did that at our council assembly, along with changes on the climate emergency, and I would strongly encourage people to do it. I'm happy to share the wording that we used, that went through lots of iterations, and it is about, we were doing a lot of this already, but it is about that kind of political leadership and statement of intent from the top. We also launched a new Equalities framework and formally embedded it into that as well. So what it's really about is considering how our decisions and our priorities can help reduce the inequalities associated with socioeconomic disadvantage. And that's a lot of words, and I'll unpick some of it in a bit. So I think it's really, really important, particularly as we come out of COVID, to look at the impact on the most vulnerable people. So in practice, what does it mean? It means that every single decision we make will have to consider socioeconomic impact. So we integrate it into every single cabinet report, everything that comes to council assembly and our equality impact assessment. It will mean that we have much more of a focus on building a better picture through data and engaging people with lived experience of poverty or who are facing socioeconomic disadvantage in our decision making. And to give 2 examples of that, how we've already done it, and again, this is not easy stuff, and I'll come on to the challenges. One was last year, we did a cumulative equalities impact analysis on our budget. So we've obviously always looked at the equality impact of each individual decision, but we did it across the piece for each protected characteristic, including socioeconomic impact. And again, really recognising the intersectionalities that, we know in Southwark, if you're from Black, Asian, minority ethnic community, you are more likely to be facing poverty. It's a particular issue of older people's poverty as well, that we see pensioner poverty, as we used to talk about a lot. And another example, we publish an annual workforce report, which looks again at each of those protected characteristics. We haven't looked at socioeconomic this year, but next year we've put a clear intention that we will be looking at that. And part of the challenge is how do we actually measure that, and I'll come on to that. So it's really about a step change in how we considered tackling poverty. And as I said, one of the key principles is engaging people in shaping this. And we've done a lot of work through our Southwark Stands Together programme, which was a response to the murder of George Floyd, to really bring together our Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities to tell us what they want us to do, but also what the challenges that they are facing. And we've built up a lot of evidence through that approach. We've also got a Community Support Alliance that we set up during COVID, and we're soon to be embarking on a test and learn project in one particular neighbourhood to really look at what are the models that work in terms of tackling services and gather more evidence about what is the reality for people in that neighbourhood who were relying on food banks as we kind of come out of COVID. We've also got some bespoke research at the moment. So a group of resident representatives is carrying out an inquiry into how people in council housing in Southwark were affected by the economic impact, and to look at what forms of support they need in the future. So just to emphasise some of the challenges, the data, we still have some, but it's a bit patchy. The census data, when it comes through, will help, but we need a lot of investment in that. And we're also aware of some of the sensitivities of asking people about levels of household income and employment status, so interested in people's experiences. The measurement, so socioeconomic, has lots of different ways of measuring income, occupation, educational attainment, wealth, where someone lives, and multidimensional, so destitution, for example. So I think the point really is that we can't use the same set of data for every single decision, and we need to look at what is the right measurement on each place. But this also really takes investment and expertise within the council, but working with external bodies. So I'll just maybe finish by touching on a few of the kind of things that we've done recently, because the socioeconomic duty is all about informing our policies and practices and programmes to make them better. And as I said, we've done a lot in the past. So just kind of 3 examples. I think during COVID, one of the main, in cash terms, our main form of financial support was support with council tax bills for low-income working families. And obviously, council tax is going to be a big issue as we look to budgets next year. Food. So we're one of 4 London boroughs, I think, that pre-COVID offered a universal primary school free meals programme, and we've expanded that to nursery before COVID, and we made sure that we continue to provide free school meals through school holidays and throughout COVID. We've also got a scheme called the Rose Vouchers, which is free fruit and veg for low-income pregnant women and children in some of the neighbourhoods with the highest deprivation, and again, really important to look specifically at the neighbourhood approach within this. And we also have the Southwark Emergency Support Scheme, which is for residents who experienced shock, financial shock during COVID, and we trebled the budget for that. And even though the needs for that have gone down, we do expect to see an increase in universal credit because of universal credit and other things in the future. So I think I'll finish there. But again, I think just to finish, I think we do have to be focused, intentional, base our policies in evidence, both the qualitative evidence, but really importantly, people's lived experience, and really learn from what doesn't work and what does, so we get it right. Thank you very much.
Alice, thank you very much for that. Honestly, just sort of listening to some of the things you guys are doing and some of the challenges we're facing, just sort of shows the tip of the iceberg as such of the challenge that we have across London in order to help support residents. And as you said, it's multidimensional, and you can't use one set of data or qualifications, right, in order to support everyone. And we'll come on to the questions as we go forward. Okay, and the next speaker we have is Councillor Damian White. He's the leader of Havering Council. Damian is going to be talking about his council's experience of tackling poverty and disadvantage in an outer London borough where the poverty profile may look somewhat different than it does in a London borough. Damian, over to you.
Thank you very much. So well, thank you for inviting me. I'm a pleasure to be able to speak today. In preparing my remarks, I looked at the briefing note that came through, and this event is being held as part of a series to mark the International Day of the Eradication of Poverty, which is on Sunday. And within the note that I was given, it stated this event is an opportunity for all of those that care about tackling poverty in the capital to come together. In my experience, and just from talking to people, I think that encompasses everyone that puts themselves forward to stand as a local councillor. Every person I spoke to across the political divide wants the best for local community. And to get the best of the local community, to support our local residents, that means confronting and dealing with the root causes of deprivation and poverty within our community. And that's something that I know that not just Havering, but Southwark, Brent, every area across London, the country is trying to deal with, but trying to deal with it in their own local context and how best we can try to support our local communities. I lead London Borough of Havering, which is an outer London borough. And whilst deprivation and poverty, it's universal, it's across the country, unfortunately. Our experiences are slightly different than sort of more inner London, most notably because of our size. We're the third largest London borough, and that half of our borough is Greenbelt. And whilst that gives access to external space, brilliant parks, it poses a significant problem for our local residents. To get from them, because we don't have historically the same level of investment in public transport from Transport for London. You can take Westminster, Kensington, Chelsea, London Borough, Fulham and Hammersmith, and put them quite neatly into Havering. And if you did that, you would put about 150, 160 tube stops in my borough. At the moment, we've only got 15 train stations. And that means if you want to get from an area of deprivation, which is concentrated primarily in both the north and the south of our borough, you want to get via public transport from the top to the bottom, it can take about an hour and 15 minutes. If you want to get across the borough into either central London or into Essex, it's relatively convenient. But actually getting from the areas of deprivation in my authority to the areas of employment or educational centres, it can be a bit of a challenge. And one of our colleges has just relocated from the centre of our authority to right down to the south to set up a construction campus, which is a brilliant idea to take advantage of all the regeneration. But if you live in the north, where I live in Harold Hill, and you want to go by public transport, and you're a young person, you are talking about an hour and 15 minutes journey each way of a morning and afternoon. And that becomes the question you've got to ask yourself, and I asked the college chancellor, is that something which those young people are going to do? Why put barriers in front of them to try to avoid being able to take advantage of education? Part of our problem in Havering, part of our experience, is that our age demographics. So I'm reliably told that we have the second highest over 65 population as a percentage of our population, second only to Bournemouth. So that in itself poses a lot of problems and challenges that we need to deal with. Most notably, women that have got retirement age that have not been able to accrue a full national insurance record. For those women, a big chunk of those, I think they're called the WASP women, the women that have suffered from the rising pension age. And that has caused a lot of serious problems in our local community, and how the council then tries to support them into continuing in employment beyond what they necessarily expected to have to work to. Part of our problem is in early 2000s, as part of the government's welfare reform changes to tackle the then budget overspend, they froze housing allowance, and they also, about 2013, froze the formula for deprivation, just at the time when levels of deprivation in my authority was significantly increasing. And part of that was down to more central London boroughs relocating of procuring accommodation, temporary accommodation in areas of London that are more affordable. The most affordable bits of London are out of London, such as Havering. So we had a significant influx of placements from more central London authorities in Havering. And that in itself brought significant challenges with it. So back in sort of early 2010s, we didn't have gangs in our authority. We weren't geared up or funded to deal with that sort of complex social issues. We've had to try to create the gangs unit. We've had to engage with the police. We've had to accept that we're no longer effectively, when it comes to social breakdown, we're not an outer London or more closely aligned to with Essex. In actual fact, we are a London authority. We face the same challenges the rest of London do. And that was a big learning curve for our officers and for our organisation, because it was the pace of change that we experienced. House price appreciation. When I first got elected in 2010, you could buy an old local authority property for about 60,000. Those properties are now about £300,000, and that is pushing people in my local community spending ever increasing amounts of the take-home pay or the welfare payments to be able to continue to stay locally, and that is pushing people into deprivation and poverty. So my authority, we try and deal with it, and what I'm about to say I think is standard, that we all have different colours or different versions of this, but we primarily focus on trying to deal with the immediate causes of poverty and what we can do to support people. And I am immensely proud that Havering, as well as a lot of other councils, stood by those children and provided free school meals when there was questions about funding the free school meals programme. Our council chose to fund it, and that was probably a more difficult decision for us to do in Havering than in other authorities, because we're not funded to the same level as other parts of London. We have some of the, I think, the third highest rate of council tax. We have no revenue support grant. We have high levels of deprivation. We're not funded the same degree and to the same way as other authorities. So for us to fund free school meals was a big issue, a big financial commitment that we had to make. But we chose to do it because it was the right thing to do. I'm very grateful the government then stepped in and provided additional financing to the council, which we then used to enhance our offer. So we now provide free swimming sessions and gym membership to all of our looked after children, to try to get those young people, to give them the same opportunities and advances that we would expect our own children to have. This fall forms part of our Havering Helps package of financial support. And at the beginning of the pandemic, we placed £2 million of our reserves, some of the lowest levels of reserves in London. We placed it into a welfare assistance fund to give grants of £100, capped at £1,000 per year to local families that were suffering from unexpected costs. And Havering, in the rest of the country, we had large numbers of people furloughed, significant levels of unemployment. Our local residents really were pushed to the brink at that point. And with government funding that came in December, we were able to enhance that funding, and we increased the limit to £150 for those families with children and for pregnant women. And that meant that a lot of we've spent 1.4 million, that's 1.4 million pounds worth of concern and fear and anxiety that we were able to remove from our communities. And that is something I'm immensely proud to have brought forward. Havering, as well as every other council, we have a council tax support scheme, and we have a discretionary housing payment top-up scheme. And that is really important because our income levels are relatively low and our rents continue to go up to a point where local people can't afford to be able to afford to rent. So what we've tried to do is take more of a strategic approach to dealing with welfare. We have brought forward a significant council house building programme, and we've got, as a percentage of our stock, I'm told we have the largest council house building programme in the country. But we've got 3,500 properties under construction, and they are council owned, new generation council properties that are of affordable rent and the old council rents, so that local people could afford to stay and put down roots and live within our communities. And for me, having settled accommodation is the first building block of a successful life, and being able to provide for yourself and your friends and your family. But we don't just want to build a physical legacy. We want to make sure that our residents get opportunity. We want our new council properties to be built by our council tenants and our local residents. So as part of our regeneration centre, Waits Residential, and we're really pleased because they share our sector ethos and trying to give those opportunities to our local residents. So we've got a significant pipeline of joint that are now on advanced one-day apprenticeships so our properties are going to be built, they're going to be project managed, they're going to be supported by our local residents where possible. Because of the significant development, not just in Havering, but in East London as a part of London, we're trying to get ahead of the curve and give our residents as many opportunities to engage in that process as possible. Something else that we've done, which I'm really, really proud of, is our community hub model. So we've gone into the areas of high levels of deprivation of our community, and we've set up 2 pilots, one in the north and one in the south, of a community hub where it's a whole range of council services, which we have, and I always get this term wrong, a local area liaison coordinator, I think the term is. And in my mind, they are the busybodies. They are local residents, they're unqualified social workers, they are the people that have that authenticity, that are from the area, that know the local people, and their job is to go out, to form connections and to meet those local residents and try to engage with them at a much earlier stage to sort of do that early intervention, but in a way that's not the council doing it. It's not the local social worker. It's not someone in a
looks like
do say you must do put faith in.
Okay.
Put that faith in that.
I think Damian's frozen, and I'm just going to give him a second or two just in case he does come back, and give him the opportunity, right, just to finish off. But I don't think it's working at the moment. I think I want to thank Damian for the contribution he's made, and also the comments in relation to housing. Actually, that they are some of the most important aspects of providing support to individuals, and the point that Damian was making about council homes, affordable homes, social homes, I think can be a major uplifting factor in supporting individuals and giving them the opportunity to actually have successful lives going forward. The community hubs are something that we're doing in Britain as well, because it does actually reach out into the community straight away, provides that support, and you're able to actually provide that sort of immediate support, right, in an environment where people feel safe and confident that they will get that support. And this will be part of the questions and discussions that we'll have after this as well. I want to go to the next speaker. The next speaker is Ellie Kershaw. She's the Tackling Poverty Programme Manager in Tower Hamlets Council. Ellie will be speaking about the poverty review that was recently carried out by Tower Hamlets and published last month. Review focused on child poverty and pensioner poverty. I think sometimes one of the elements that can be forgotten at times. I think there may be some slides as well, and I will hand over to you, Ellie.
Thank you. So I thought I would start off just giving a little bit of context about Tower Hamlets, because not everybody knows the area well. So the good things about Tower Hamlets, we've got one of the fastest growing economies in the UK, steep decline in worklessness, a very young population where our education has completely transformed over the last few years, so that our attainment gap, particularly for children on free school meals, is now one of the smallest in the country, and it's also among the 10 most socially mobile areas in England. If you could skip on a couple, please, Catherine. But poverty is very high in the area, and it is still rising. So 56% of our children are in low-income households after housing costs. And going back to what's already been said about the importance of housing, that's actually 37% if you take housing costs out. So although 37% would still be bad, almost another 20% being in poverty as a result of the cost of housing is obviously terrible, and something that's really, really hard for us as local authorities to do anything about. We have 44% of our older people in income deprived households, which that's compared to about 16% is the national average. So you can clearly see that we're kind of hit at both ends. And we are among the boroughs with the highest destitution, and there are a lot of reasons for that. Worklessness in work poverty, obviously for everybody, the benefit levels. We do have high levels of BAME residents who are, as a lot of you will know, usually disproportionately impacted when benefits are reformed, and in the working life as well. Please, Catherine. So obviously the council has been doing what it can to support these residents, and some of these things are, you know, things that every council is doing. Council tax reduction, ours is up to 100% still. We offer universal free school meals up until the time that children go to secondary school. We have for quite some time had a resident support scheme. That's our grant scheme, which we fund to the tune of around £600,000 a year. Last year that was significantly increased, but in the normal way of things, that's about what it is. So that's the kind of direct support. Obviously, again, through the pandemic, which I'll talk about a little bit more, we've provided a lot more direct support than we normally would. We've then got various services like children's centres, and we're trying to help people to increase their benefit intake where they are eligible for certain benefits, both the mainstream benefits and things like Healthy Start vouchers, which can really support households to increase their income. Yes, please. So we do have a Tackling Poverty programme, which is my role to head that programme, and we do quite a lot of different activity. Although we are a small team, there are 10 of us on the team, but we have one side of the team does outreach, working directly with residents, helping them make claims, increasing their benefit take up, that kind of thing. The resident support grant scheme falls under us. All of the holiday hunger programmes. We do benefit take-up campaigns, pilot projects with other teams and external partners, and over the last 18 months, predominantly COVID support and recovery. So one of our key things has been obviously our emergency food work. We started off direct delivering parcels to residents, and then we set up a food hub, which delivers large-scale amounts of food to our voluntary sector partners to enable them to then give that food to residents. The vast majority of that's come in through donations and repurposed food, working with Felix Project, Fair Share, those kind of organisations. And we've delivered over 1,200 tonnes, well, more than that now, up to about 1,400 tonnes of food since last June. Which has fed a huge number of households in the borough. Just very quickly, that some people might be interested at a later stage, we have provided some form of meal provision every holiday since last Easter, and that's just a sort of breakdown of what the kind of things that we've provided. So in the later ones, that has been through the grants that the government's given us for COVID, but some of the earlier ones were council funded before those grants existed. One thing that we're very keen on, and that we used quite a lot in our poverty review, is we use a lot of data to target services, and we use a product that some of you will be aware of, the Lift dashboard, which basically uses data that all councils hold on people on housing benefit, people on council tax support, and then it maps those households so that we can tell roughly who is able to cope on the income they've got, who is struggling on that income, and who is already in poverty. It's a really useful tool. We use it for lots of things, like, for example, as you can see here, when we were setting up our holiday clubs, we looked at where the most deprivation was according to the dashboard, so that we could make sure we had coverage there. And we use it for a number of purposes, including writing bids, so that we can clearly show where our highest levels of poverty are within the borough. Other things that we've been able to use this data for, which has been really successful, is to help people to claim the benefits that they are entitled to. So pension credit we did, and we will continue to do that on an annual basis. Although there were only 80 new claims as a result of the first take-up campaign that we did, the rise in annual income was £156,000 to our residents, and that is every year, so that's quite a huge amount of money. We use it to proactively identify households who might need a discretionary housing payment before they get as far as approaching us as homeless, concentrating particularly on private sector tenants who often don't know these things exist. We have used it for a council tax project, which wasn't actually aimed at getting arrears in, it was actually aimed at increasing household income. And that was a project that we did with the Citizen Advice Bureau, which again, more than paid for the project, and is something that we will be repeating. So we have all of this activity going on, but we are clear that it's not enough. So this year we started our poverty review. That was led by our members, and supported by local voluntary sector organisations, one in particular, Toynbee Hall, who helped us with their peer research programme, where they train up local residents to ask questions of other residents. And they also ran some workshops for us, speaking to people with lived experience, so that we could ensure that we were getting their input as well. We had an overall reference group, which was made up of the council and a number of other organisations, local, national and residents. And then on specific topics, we had focus groups with residents and partners. I think what residents told us probably won't be too much of a shock to anybody. The benefit levels are too low, access to employment, particularly with decent pay, issues to do with the pandemic, that people are ashamed of admitting that they're in poverty, that there are digital barriers. You know, really none of this is probably anything we didn't know, but it is really important that we do hear it from our residents rather than just making the assumption that that's what's going on. So this brought us to use all of the information to look at to strictly focus what it is that the local area can do. And throughout the entire of the review, we have had to keep reiterating the point that there are certain things that we can do as a local authority and certain things that we don't have control over, such as housing prices. Yes, we have quite a good social housing building programme, but we're not going to build enough for everybody, and the cost of private rents, other than lobbying, is something that's out of our control. Benefit levels, again, the same thing. We can ensure that people get what they're entitled to, but the level of those benefits is out of our control. And it's quite a difficult thing in a review where those are some of the largest issues facing residents, to be saying, we know those are big problems for you, but we really can't do much about those things. So can we please have some focus on things that we can do to support you directly, while we will undertake some lobbying nationally to try and get something done about those other issues. So we've put it into a number of work streams, which are about preventing poverty, increasing income, reducing costs for people, emergency support, and then wellbeing and life chances, which is obviously a much longer term piece of work than the others. And then there are, of course, a number of different areas that fall under those. And what we're doing at the moment is taking each of those areas and the feedback that we had from residents and coming up with specific actions on a short, medium and long term basis. So as you can see, you know, short term is very much, let's get some money to people, let's get the benefits taken up, let's work to get the communications right so that people are seeking help as early as possible. Longer term is about a more of a whole council approach to early financial intervention. So we're working with a number of departments at the moment to see how we can make that more of a day-to-day thing that those departments do, rather than just dealing with the direct issues that residents present to them with. We already have a large investment in investment and skills, but we're increasing that and seeing what we can do to work to get more and more good, well-paying jobs for our residents. And then there are a number of things that residents brought to our attention that we need to consider. So communications and how we do it, how we make sure that we continue to involve residents, how to measure the impact, what we can do about the fact that a lot of work is low paid and insecure, and then things about childcare, free education places. How do we make sure that the right people are taking these up? And then making things just easier for people to access. So if someone is in fuel poverty, let's make sure that we're looking at the other areas that we might be able to support them with at the same time. And one thing that's come out very strongly, that again will be an issue for most councils, but particularly in large cities, is support for adults and families with no recourse to public funds, which is extremely limited. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Ellie, thank you very much for that. I think some of the points you made in relation to dignity sort of relate to what Alice was just saying about how people need to be treated with respect and courtesy, actually, when they're coming in for help. and that support. And I saw on one of your slides, it spoke about debt, and that's one of the things that people do find very hard to talk about. And that's one of the things that we have found in Brent as well, where people come to you when it's quite late in the process, but we it's great to see all the work that you guys have been doing in order to support people with their debt support, and giving them actually the opportunity to move forward. We have come to the end of our speakers, and we now have an opportunity